Hey guys, welcome back. So today we're out at the range, talk about the M4 and a rifle the US military was looking to replace this weapon during the global war on terror. Now the M16 has been in the US arsenal since the Vietnam War, the mid-1960s. So this is America's longest serving service rifle, but throughout my entire life, the US military has been constantly evaluating weapons and ammunition to try to replace this particular weapon. Now they continue to modify the M16 to this current configuration, but they've never really moved until recent times to truly replace it. And they've evaluated a bunch of different weapon systems. And one we want to talk about today, in my opinion, had the most promise, and it's unfortunate that we didn't adopt it. So we're going to start off by shooting this FN M4, and then we're going to talk about the Barrett M468 rifle. A lot of folks ask me, how can I get involved in the firearms business in that particular community? And one of the best ways to do that is to become a gunsmith. Every gunsmith I know is just overbooked with work. It's a very good living. And so if you would like to become a gunsmith, you need to go to a gunsmithing school or become an apprentice for an existing gunsmith. But Modern Gun School is an accredited college that also works with veterans in the GI Bill, where you can go and get a degree from accredited college in gunsmithing and then go out and start your own gunsmithing business, which I think is a really great option. Again, throughout my entire life, gunsmiths have always been able to earn a really good living, assuming they have a really strong work ethic. So please check out Modern Gun School. I do have a link in the video description below. This rifle needs no introduction. It's the M4 carbine. Throughout the global war on terror, this was America's primary infantry rifle. This would even trickle out into the United States Marine Corps before they went with the IAR, which replaced their M16A4s. And I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, but this still is America's primary infantry rifle. Now, the United States has adopted the M5 from SIG, which has a much more potent cartridge, the 277 Fury / 6.8 by 51. However, that rifle probably won't see mainline infantry use for quite some time, if ever. It may just wind up being used by special operations. We really don't know. But right now, this rifle is still what the U.S. military primarily uses across all branches, with the exception of the Marine Corps, who their infantry units, again, use the IAR, or the HK416, if you will, a variation of it. This rifle, the biggest complaint about it isn't really its reliability, isn't its lightweight, isn't its modularity. This weapon has evolved into an outstanding infantry rifle. What the military has had a hard time with for decades is the cartridge it chambers. The 223, which is the basis for the 5.56, was originally derived from a varminting cartridge. It's meant to shoot small critters like prairie dogs and coyotes, but it has its advantages. It has very mild recoil for the most part when compared to things like the M14 or the M1 Garand or the 1903 Springfield. And it has, that reduced recoil. It has the reduced weight, so you can carry much more ammunition. And it's very controllable on full auto fire. So when you're taking a green troop and you're introducing them into the infantry role and how to use a weapon like this, it's a very easy weapon to learn versus earlier weapon systems that had quite a bit more recoil. So it does have its advantages. Its big disadvantage is at range. The 5.56 round really likes 20-inch barrels, let's say. The M4 that you see here is a 14.5-inch barrel, which has a pinned and weld muzzle device on it. So this is not an SBR. This is one of the FN Collector Series rifles. But yeah, that 5.56 really likes the longer barrel to achieve its optimal performance. This is the M468. It's a play on M4 rifle, 6.8 cartridge. Despite the rather ornate rail system that's on here, keep in mind this is from the early 2000s. Things like this were quite popular back then. We've moved since to lighter rail systems. But this, in essence, is a standard M4 rifle, standard mil-spec upper, standard mil-spec lower. This one has the A2 and rifle stock on it and has the rifle length recoil system in it, but it was also offered with the M4 style shortened buffer tube and collapsible stocks. It was offered in both configurations. This has been referred to as the DMR version of the rifle, which is why I have a magnified optic on it. This rifle is probably about 98% parts compatible with the standard M4 infantry rifle. The biggest difference is it chambers 6.8 SPC. 6.8 SPC significantly boosts the energy that this weapon can deliver on target versus the standard 5.56. And we'll talk about various versions of the 5.56 and the ballistics here in the next segment. So this rifle, if you will, by today's standards, imagine this arms rail system isn't there. It could be replaced with a lighter handguard. We have the folding front sight here. And then this weapon was also intended to be used with a Mark 12 style over the barrel suppressor. The suppressors, I think 50 of them, if I recall, were actually produced for evaluation purposes. Very few are known to exist. I've never seen one for sale. And then keep in mind, we're coming out of the 1994 assault weapons ban. And so that would sunset in 2004, the same time this rifle was being developed. And so we have a featureless muzzle device on here, which is not a flash suppressor. This is a muzzle brake. So this rifle, again, has about 98% parts commonality with the standard M4 rifle. This one is even direct gas impingement. So if you take a look inside of the gun, you're going to find that the only real difference between this and its 5.56 counterpart is the bolt. So the bolt and the barrel are different. Everything else, gas key, carrier, recoil system, trigger group, upper and lower receivers, all those other parts are compatible with the existing inventory of M4 parts. So this weapon would have made a lot of sense logistically, and for use with special operations and things like that, which is what it was intended for, it would make a whole lot of sense, and that is because of its ballistics. Now, after this rifle was produced in its direct gas impingement version, it wasn't adopted by the U.S. military. The U.S. military dropped the 6.8 SPC project. Barrett went to sell this to the civilian market. They produced the M468 for a little while, but ultimately it would evolve into this rifle, which we've shown on the channel here before, and this is the Rec 7. Now, this rifle would go on to evolve yet again, ditching the arms rail once and for all, going to a more lightweight rail system that we're used to today in 2023. It got rid of this, suppressor mounting system that doesn't exist, got rid of all the cool stuff that you see on here to go much lighter. But the Rec 7 is something that's still in production. The biggest difference between this and the M468 is that the Swan, or the arms, mount, and handguard, all that stuff that's on the M468 is completely different on the Rec 7, which stands for Reliability Enhanced Carbine. It has a different rail on it, but it looks very similar. And this one is a short stroke gas piston, where this rifle is a direct gas impingement rifle. So why the difference? Well, the direct gas impingement was intended to entice the military into adopting it because it was backwards compatible with the existing M16 and M4 rifles that were currently in inventory. So when it was dropped by the U.S. military, Barrett took it to what was then popular in the early 2000s, which was the short stroke gas piston system, which everybody in the AR community was gravitating towards at the time. Now we're starting to see people come back to the DI system. So this rifle is really impressive. So let's talk about the ballistics of the 6.8 and just how impressive this rifle truly is and why I think it probably should have been adopted. Comparing the 6.8 SPC to the 5.56, let's first take a look at the weight of the cartridges and what the typical combat load would look like. Here I have two 30-round magazines. This is a 6.8 magazine from Barrett that holds 30 rounds, and this is a standard Stanag military magazine with 30 rounds of 62 grain Federal loaded into it. In the 6.8, I have 110 grain S&B loaded, but that's commercial ammunition. We don't know what the military ultimately would have adopted. Had they gone with the 6.8 SPC, it very well could have been hotter than what we have out here for testing this afternoon. Standard bullet weight for 6.8 SPC ranges between 90 grains and 115 grains, but you can find variations out there on the commercial market that go outside of those ranges. So using the 110 grain, which is between the 190 and the 115, which is why we chose it for today's comparison, let's take a look at the weight of the magazines themselves. So the 6.8 SPC has a loaded weight of 27.3 ounces. The 5.56 with 62 grain projectiles has a fully loaded magazine weight of 16.4 ounces. So if we extrapolate that out to a standard combat load, let's say 2 magazine pouches, each magazine pouch holds 3 magazines, then 1 in the gun, that gives us 7 magazines. If we take a look at 7 magazines of 6.8 with 110 grain projectiles, we're looking at 191.1 ounces. Divide that by 16, that gives us 11.9 pounds of ammunition in a standard combat load. Contrast that with the 5.56 and the 5.56, 7 magazines, a 62 grain will give us 114.8 ounces. Divide that by 16, that gives us 7.17 pounds. That is a difference of 4.9 pounds. Not insignificant. That's pretty heavy. You'll probably have heard the phrase, ounces equal pounds, pounds equals pain. But there is something to consider besides just the simple weight of the combat load. We have to take a look at the performance of the cartridges. So let's take a look at a commercial 110 grain 6.8 SPC, and let's compare that to an M855 and an M855A1 cartridge out of a 14.5 inch M4 barrel. So this is where kind of the rubber meets the road. Let's talk about the ballistics, okay? Again, we're using commercial 110 grain 6.8, but we do have NATO spec M855 and M855A1 out here. So how does the 6.8 SPC and its commercial offerings stack up? Well, first of all, let's take a look at the SS109 or M855. The ammunition that we tested is from a NATO country. It is MKE. I toured the factory. It has the penetrator inside, all that good stuff, 62 grain bullet weight. And we got a muzzle velocity out of the 14.5 inch M4. That was 2,912 feet per second. So that equates to 1,168 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. Now let's compare that to the new M855A1, an outstanding cartridge. It took us half a century to get here, but the M855A1 is probably the best cartridge ever developed for the 5.56. Out of the M4, with its 14.5 inch barrel, we have a muzzle velocity of 2,956 feet per second. That gives us 1,203 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. Not insignificant. Now compare that also with the ballistics performance of the M855A1 cartridges that are out there. There's a handful of different cartridges the U.S. military uses. It is actually, it performs very well in barrier penetration, in soft tissue, and also, every way you could actually compare the M855 to the M855A1. The M855A1 just walks all over the M193 and the M855. So how does that stack up to the 6.8 SPC commercial loading? Keep in mind the military may have loaded it a little bit hotter. So we have that 110 grain bullet going 2,633 feet per second out of a 16 inch barrel. Barrett submitted a 12 inch and a 16 inch barrel for consideration by the U.S. military. I only have the 16 inch version available. So that 110 grain bullet, 2633, gives us a muzzle energy of 1694. That is 491 foot-pounds of muzzle energy difference between the M855A1. That's not insignificant. 491 foot-pounds is about the same energy that you would find in a plus P plus 9mm. So in essence, when a 6.8 hits something, it's hitting with all the energy of a 5.56, the M855A1, plus a 9mm plus P plus on top of it. That is impressive. That gives you range and power that the best of the best in terms of 5.56 simply can't touch. Now, most of you watching this that use an M4 or a 5.56 rifle of some variation for self-defense, for training, for all that stuff, civilian applications, most of you don't stockpile M855A1. It's unobtainium. Yes, you can buy it, but you're going to pay a premium for it when you can find it. Most of you probably don't even buy M855 because of cost. Most of you don't even buy M193 because of cost. How many of you watching this have cases of old steel case Wolf sitting in the basement in case, something happens that you need it? Probably a lot of you. How many of you, when you go out to buy 223 or 5.56 for your fighting rifle, how many of you go out there and buy M193 or M855? I would say most of you, not all of you, but most of you are going to buy the cheapest stuff you can find. So that means you're going to pick up just about any commercial loading out there. So let's take a look at a commercial loading from Federal. A 62 grain 223 cartridge, American Eagle, gives us a muzzle velocity out of the 14.5 inch barrel of 2633, which is an anemic 955 foot-pounds of energy. So the stuff that you're stockpiling, especially the Wolf, which is low end 223 in terms of performance, the stuff you're probably stockpiling comes nowhere near the performance of the M855A1, and certainly nowhere near the performance of the 6.8 in its commercial offerings. Now that's something to chew on. So let's talk about the recoil. I'm sure you're thinking, well, with all that extra energy, the 6.8 has to be a heavy recoiling cartridge, like maybe a 308 or something. But in this particular rifle, the M16 M4 AR-15, it's not all that bad. It's actually quite controllable. So first, let's fire off a few rounds out of the M4 rifle. And this is just standard Federal American Eagle 62 grain stuff. This is an M855, which is the really spicy stuff, which is quite a bit more punchy, even with the direct gas impingement system of the AR-15. So this isn't the hottest stuff, but it'll give you an idea of what the recoil's like. Now, I can't really tell you what I'm feeling, but hopefully you can see visually that this rifle moves around a little bit. Okay, very controllable. It's not heavy recoiling, but there's some movement in the gun. But as far as 5.56 rifles go, the M4 is easily one of the most controllable and one of the more mild recoiling guns. When you get into guns like the G36 and stuff like that that use gas pistons, the recoil impulse becomes more abrupt. Let's take a look at the 6.8 next. The M4 carbine has what's called a carbine length gas system. It's one of the shorter gas systems for the rifle. When you get into 300 blackout and stuff like that, it gets even shorter. But this rifle, the M468, has what's known as a mid-length gas system. So it has a 16-inch barrel, and the gas system comes out to about here, a little bit longer than the M4, which generally speaking, most people would agree that the mid-length gas systems, especially in the DI guns, is a more pleasant gun to shoot. So now let's fire off some rounds out of the 6.8. Keeping in mind, this does have a muzzle brake on it and a rifle length recoil system in it, so it's not a direct one-to-one comparison, but this was a configuration that was considered by the US military. That rifle length system I'm so familiar with and I love it so much, but the gun is quite controllable. So for civilian use especially, this thing, in my opinion, is vastly superior to the 5.56. Since this particular M468 is set up to be a DMR, I have a magnified optic on it. The optic I'm using is a primary arms. It's a GLX 4-16 by 50 millimeter, and you can see the turrets on the scope. They have little locking turrets with little press buttons here, so you can make adjustments to the elevation and windage. Then it has an illuminated ACSS reticle inside there, and also side focus for the various ranges you might be shooting it at. Paired with this rifle, it's an outstanding setup. I think I may have a round in there already. And it makes hitting those targets way out there super easy. 6.8 SPC has a cult-like following primarily in the hunting world. You'll find, especially I found in Southwest United States, Texas, Oklahoma, places like that, the 6.8 is very popular for deer hunting, pig hunting, and things like that. It hits like a hammer. It is a very effective cartridge. Now, there is a downside to civilian ownership of the 6.8. It's easy enough to get into. There's plenty of guns out there that chamber it. However, the cost of ammunition is notably higher than 5.56, especially when you're shopping for budget 223 to stockpile. 6.8 at its cheapest is 90 cents or a little less per round. 5.56 you can get for a fraction of that. So the cost of operation is cost prohibitive if you have to spend $1,000 for a case of ammunition to go to a training course. However, if you're truly interested in performance and you're truly interested in delivering energy downrange and having the most effective rifle system, I think the 6.8 SPC is an outstanding cartridge. It's one of my favorites. I absolutely love the 6.8. I just wish the tactical community would embrace it more, because if they would, more guns would be sold that chambered it, the cost of production would come down somewhat and make it more affordable. But you also have more lead in the projectiles, more brass in the case, more powder in there. So just by the cost of components, it still will always be slightly more expensive, even in an ideal world, than the 5.56. But it's my personal favorite. I have a lot of 6.8 firearms. You've seen them here on the channel in the past. I absolutely love the cartridge, and I do think the military should have adopted it, at least by SOCOM or Special Operations, Rangers, Delta, SEALs, whatever. Had they adopted it, I think they probably would have liked it. Now, they've long since moved on to things like 6 ARC and stuff like that. But the 6.8 is still, by today's standards, a very effective cartridge. I look forward to your comments down below, guys. What do you think of the 6.8? Is it something that you shoot? Is it something you have interest in? Is it something you just never really knew much about? Did you know that the M468 actually existed? And the history behind it. Very interesting weapon system for sure. Comment down below. I look forward to reading those comments. If you'd like to support us here at the Military Arms channel so we can continue to bring you content like this, please consider becoming part of our Patreon family. Also, you have a little thanks button underneath the video player. Right now, you can click that thanks button and throw us a few bucks to help support us in the age of demonetization. Or you can become a subscriber here on the channel. And there's a little join button underneath the video player right now you're watching. Click that and you can support us month to month right here on YouTube. Last but not least, please swing by and check out Copper Custom. Thank you for 15 years of support, and we will talk to you guys soon.